Shenanigans, back again, and welcome to part 4 of our top cards of Hearthstone series. Today we will be looking at the neutral legendaries, the top 10 neutral legendary cards. And legends are an interesting, I guess you'd call them a subset of cards, because while they're not required to make a deck viable, they are still incredibly powerful, even though in some cases they're rather narrow. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get further into the list. But let's start now with our honorable mentions. Of course, those go to what I would call the tech legends. That would include Harrison Jones, 5/5/4, destroy your opponent's weapon and draw cards equal to its durability, as well as the Black Knight. There we are. 6/4/5, destroy an enemy minion with taunt. So in the case of Harrison, his stats 5/4 aren't the best. It's all about the battle cry, and being able to draw a decent amount of cards off an opponent's weapon being destroyed is quite a huge tempo swing. In the case of the Black Knight here, you also have an understated minion for 6 mana. It's really kind of an overcosted Yeti, with another battle cry that is also very powerful. You'll find that both of these cards are quite good, but only in certain situations. Obviously, when the meta dictates that there's a lot of weapons and a lot of taunt, then both of these are very good. Unfortunately, you only have 30 card slots, so even when the meta dictates that it's good to play these cards, it can sometimes be difficult just trying to fit them into the decks. So that's why they make our honorable mention, the Black Knight and Harrison Jones. Alright, moving on to number 10 on our list. It's actually a relatively small legend, but it has a great effect, and that's Blood Mage Thalmus. It's 2 mana, 1/1, spell damage +1, death rattle, draw a card. So where does this card fit into decks? Well, it's commonly used in spell-heavy rogue and shaman decks, and in most cases you would say that Blood Mage Thalmus is a staple for both of those classes. Rogue, of course, having tons of small damage spells, as well as Shaman. It's very important in Shaman because it is often considered kind of a guaranteed spell power totem when you don't want to take the risk of using your hero power to get the totem. What makes this card so strong, of course, is not really its stats. And if you're familiar, 2 mana, you can get a Cobalt Geomancer, 2/2 with spell damage of +1. But the additional death rattle of drawing a card gives you that card advantage that we've talked about before in previous episodes, so as even if Blood Mage Thalmus dies, it replaces itself. So that's why it's number 10 on our list, Blood Mage Thalmus. So if 1 spell damage is good, wonder how much better 5 spell damage is, right? Well, if you wanted it, you can get it, and that is in the form of Malygo. Malygo, number 9 on our list, 9 mana, 4/12 dragon, spell damage of +5. So everything that we said about Blood Mage Thalmus is pretty much the case in terms of Malygo. It's quite popular in Rogue, Shaman, and sometimes Mage decks. Again, the idea of small damaging spells just being amplified with this extra huge spell damage buff can make for some great late-game finishers. Our biggest problem with Malygo, though, happens to be the mana cost. 9 mana makes it very difficult to play and then even combo cards in the same turn that you play it. So Malygo ends up being one of those cards that are very narrow in its uses, but if you can get it to stick and be able to finish off your opponent with spells with massive spell damage, there's your win condition. And that's why Malygo makes number 9 on our list of the top neutral legendary cards. If you happen to like dragons with incredible effects, I think you're going to get quite a kick out of number 8 on our list. Of course, that is Alexstraza. 9 mana, 8/8. Dragon, of course, battle cry. Set the hero's remaining health to 15. I sometimes refer to it as the secret weapon of combo and control decks, typically used in Warrior and Mage. And what it allows you to do is focus on board control during most of the game instead of having to damage your opponent. Being able to just, as a surprise, drop a hero's health, your opponent's health in this case, to half of its normal starting amount is very strong, and it allows you to burst your opponent down fairly quickly. Also note that the battle cry can be used on your own hero as well, and so in a pinch, it can be a very large heal. This flexibility allows Alexstraza to be used in more than one way, making it a very strong card. We've talked about several cards that are used for combos. Well, how about a card that breaks those combos? Look at Theb, number 7, I believe, on our list. And that is 5 for a 5/5 of the battle cry. Enemy spells cost 5 more next turn. So Theb is a combo denial type of card. It's very useful against rogues and druids because of their spell burst potential. And Theb is one of those cards you don't necessarily want to play on turn 5. Specifically against, say, a druid, you might want to wait until you know they'll be sitting at roughly 9 mana so you can help deny their Force of Nature Savage Roar combo, things like that. You'll commonly see Theb in a multitude of different types of decks. I've even seen some Zoo players play Theb as a bit of a precaution against area of effect spells. And again, 5 mana for a 5/5 is still pretty good, and a nice battle cry to stop your opponent makes Theb an incredible card. Note that you can only get Theb in the Plague Quarter of Naxxramas. I believe that's the second wing. And again, this further exemplifies the strength of the cards that were found as rewards in the Naxxramas expansion. I would highly recommend you get through Naxxramas. Moving on to number 6 on our list, it's another 5/5. It used to be 5, but it's not now, and that is Sylvanas Windrunner. 6 mana for a 5/5 nowadays. Death Rattle, take control of a random enemy minion. So this is a very strong card, and like I said, it used to cost 5 mana, and quite frankly, at 5, it was incredibly undercosted. You'll find Sylvanas mostly in control decks. You commonly see her in Warrior and Priest. What's great about Sylvanas is that she can be comboed with a number of different spells. You can use Brawl, for example, in Warrior, and if the opponent's minion happens to stay alive through the Brawl, then of course Sylvanas will take it. And in the case of Priest, you can use Shadow Word Death to kill your own Sylvanas and steal some other card of theirs. In certain situations, Sylvanas can provide a very strong board swing. You might be able to use Sylvanas to kill, say, 2 of the opponent's smaller minions, and then steal control of one of their other minions, making for an almost, I guess you'd say, kind of a 3-for-1 type of effect. And that's an incredibly strong play. So that's why Sylvanas sits so high on our top 10 neutral legends of Hearthstone. Coming in at number 5 is another card that's associated with death. It's our Lich friend himself, Mr. Kelthuzad. 8 mana for a 6/8. At the end of each turn, summon all friendly minions that died this turn. Kelthuzad can be found in the final week of Naxxramas, the Frostworm Lair, as the reward for, of course, defeating Kelthuzad the boss. Kelthuzad works well in control decks that can put together a decent board state before dropping KT onto the table. You'll often see him alongside a lot of Death Rattle minions, as they'll die, of course, send their Death Rattle out, and then get respawned. But some other great types of cards that go well with KT are, of course, Divine Shield and Taunt minions. If you think of the case of Sludge Belcher and Sunwalker being out while you have Kelthuzad on the table, you can form this taunt wall that will basically be impossible to get around. Also like to mention that if you can find a way to get multiple Kelthuzads on the table, Shaman typically does this using Ancestral Spirit or Reincarnate, or you might even use Faceless Manipulator. You'll be sitting with a board state that's pretty much impossible to get rid of short of a Twisting Nether or a Deathwing situation. Continuing on to number 4 on our list, it is another dragon. One that saw a lot more play earlier on before a lot of the expansions, and that is Ysera. 9 mana for a 4/12. You still see Ysera today. Let's go through this ability, though. At the end of your turn, add a dream card to your hand. Now, I can't really bring up the dream cards here inside the client. You'd have to actually play Ysera and see the dream cards. But there are, I think, 5 dream cards. They're all incredible cards, really, for their cost. Some, of course, are better than others. And what Ysera represents here is a card advantage powerhouse. In the early days of Hearthstone, if you could get 2 to 3 dream cards off of Ysera, you were almost guaranteed to win the game. As I said, Ysera was considered probably the #1 legend before any of the expansions, but since has really dropped to more powerful cards. Ysera, of course, being a dragon, has gained some popularity with the addition to Blackrock Mountain. All right, moving on to number 3 on our list, and it is a tie. And this is a tie between Ragnaros the Fire Lord, 8 mana for 8/8, can't attack. At the end of your turn, deal 8 damage to a random enemy. And Sneed's Old Shredder, 8 mana, 5/7 mech, Death Rattle, summon a random legendary minion. I feel these two cards are almost equal in terms of overall strength. You could look at Ragnaros and say that he's slightly better due to his size, but then you would also have to consider that he's easily killed by Big Game Hunter. On the flip side of that, of course, if Sneed's Old Shredder becomes silenced, that takes away quite a bit of his ability, being able to have a random legend summoned after this. Not only do both the cards cost 8 mana, but they both have a bit of a random factor, making it a little unpredictable as to exactly how powerful they'll end up being. In most cases, though, both of them are quite good. They kind of represent those bombs that you want to drop late in the game to really seal the deal against your opponent. Moving on to number 2, we have another strong card, this one found in the first week of Blackrock. Emperor Thorsan, 6 mana for a 5/5, so it's got kind of the Sylvanas treatment there. At the end of your turn, reduce the cost of cards in your hand by 1. Emperor Thorsan has done so much for the meta within the last few months, and I think it's probably the most impactful card we've seen in the meta recently. You'll often see Emperor Thorsan used in control decks, and most often in kind of your mid-range combo decks. Getting Thorsan out as early as possible can be very strong because you'll commonly have a lot of extra cards in your hand early on in the game, and Druids have been able to capitalize on that by, of course, using Innervates, Wild Growths, things of that to ramp up and get him into play quickly. The Emperor's not just for Druids, though. You'll commonly see Thorsan in Mage decks, particularly control decks, as well as warrior decks, both control and the Grim Patron variant that has sprung up since Blackrock Mountain. I would say that if you're looking to build a control or especially a combo deck, you should hurry and get Emperor Thorsan unlocked as soon as possible. Alright, moving on to the top neutral legend on our list. I'm sure you can guess by now. It's our good old friend, 7 mana. No, it's not Malorn. It's Dr. Boom. 7 mana, 7/7, Battlecry, summon 2 1/1 Boombots. Of course, if you've never seen a Boombot before, I don't know what rock you've been hiding under. Those are, of course, 1/1 mechs with a death rattle of deal between 1 and 4 damage to a random enemy. So Dr. Boom, what can be said? Well, Dr. Boom is one of those cards that can almost generally be used in just about every deck. I've seen even low-cost aggro decks throw in a Dr. Boom as kind of a late-game bomb. No pun intended. And he fits equally as well in control decks like Handlock and even Warrior. People often compare him to, the War Golem, 7 mana for a 7/7 with all these extras, but being a neutral legend, I would have to say that he's probably most comparable to what I think would be a Nyxia. That's 9 mana for an 8/8, Battlecry, summon 1/1 Whelps until your side of the battlefield is full. Very similar style of Battlecry, but I would happen to say that for 7 mana for Dr. Boom, and what the Boombots do, of course, is in many ways much better than a Nyxia and an army of Whelps. So what makes Dr. Boom so good? Well, 7 mana for a 7/7 is really kind of on par when it comes to stats. The Boombots are pretty much the difficult part. See, even if you use, say, Big Game Hunter to clear Dr. Boom out of the way, you still have the 2 Boombots to deal with. When you really consider and you add up the stats, you'd say, well, Dr. Boom 7/7, 2 Boombots, 1 each, so that's 9/9 worth of stats for 7, with somewhere between 2 to 8 additional damage when the Boombots die. It's an incredibly strong card, and objectively speaking, it's one of the strongest 7-drops in the game. Lots of people, including myself, have said before that Dr. Boom could kind of use a nerf. Blizzard somehow disagrees. I would have to say that if you're going to craft a legend, you really can't do much better in terms of overall usefulness than Dr. Boom. So that does it for our top 10 neutral legend cards of Hearthstone. I should note that I'm also considering some other videos, maybe some top cards for each of the classes, Paladin, Rogue, etc., but I'd like to get your guys' opinion. If you'd leave me a comment saying whether or not you'd be interested in seeing more videos like this, I'd really appreciate it. I think that will just about do it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more Hearthstone action, as well as some of my other videos. Till next time, guys, take care.